Howdy y'all, welcome back to Plain Folk Living. Most of the media that's out there that depicts nuclear war or like World War III or something, the world is completely decimated. You take a look at Fallout and you're just in a complete nuclear wasteland. Same with something like A Boy and His Dog. It's just a total wasteland. There is nothing left of civilization at all. But I want to talk about something that feels a little more realistic, and that is the show Jericho. And I'm sure many of you have seen the show because it's been out for 20 years, and maybe many of you have not. But it came out in 2006, and some people did request this in my previous Fallout videos. They wanted some discussion about Jericho. And I do too, because I don't see a whole lot of discussion about Jericho online usually, at least not like videos and stuff about it, especially on YouTube. It seems to be pretty sparse. And Jericho is my favorite TV show of all time, and it's got some strong contenders, things like Firefly and Star Trek The Next Generation, some of my other favorites. But Jericho is about a small town in Kansas, on the western part of Kansas near the Colorado border. And I am going to go into some spoilers in this video. It's not going to be a total just recap video, more of a discussion. I want to just have a discussion with you all about Jericho because I love the damn show so much. But warning for anybody who does want to watch the show, if you haven't seen it, there will be some spoilers in this. So you can skip this video if you want to go watch it and then maybe come back later on. Maybe you'll binge it, I don't know. The first season has like 26 episodes, I think, and then there is a second season, which I'll get into later in this video, and that has 8 episodes. So definitely go check the show out if you have not seen it. It's fantastic, especially if you love things like Fallout. There's a lot of survival elements within the show. But what I love about it is that it's not just strictly survival in the sense of Fallout, where you have a lone figure, a lone person walking through the wasteland and coming across different communities and things that are rebuilding in the wastes. And instead it focuses on a single town. And this town of Jericho, when the show starts out, we're introduced to the main character of the show who drives the show forward. His name is Jake Green, and Jericho, Kansas is his hometown. But you know it's a good show because it starts out with a song from The Killers when it shows Jake Green landing in the Denver airport. And he goes in the parking garage and uncovers his 1969 Plymouth Roadrunner. So we've got The Killers, we've got 1969 Plymouth Roadrunner. How could the show get any better? Well, it does get better because it has competent writers and competent characters. So it's basically like the opposite of the Fallout show on Amazon Prime. And Jake is returning from an unknown destination, at least unknown to us, and actually unknown to the other characters in the show as well, because he kind of vanished from town for a few years. And we do learn some of the backstory stuff later on. But he returns to Jericho, and he returns because he's trying to get some money that his grandfather left him. And his family doesn't know why, the audience doesn't know why. But he gets some of the money. He's heading back to Denver. He's heading back out to leave. And he witnesses a nuclear detonation off in the distance, like far off in the distance. And this town of Jericho, the townspeople see this detonation as well. And Jericho's a pretty small town, maybe around 5,000 people or so, which, it's a nice, like, tight-knit community. So that's important for where the show goes going forward. And they all witness this nuclear explosion, and they can deduce that it came from around the area of Denver. Just based on the size of it, the distance, how far away it is. And that whole first episode of the show, the pilot episode, is about kind of the world building of the town itself. Half of it is showing the world building, everything, what the town is, introducing different characters. And then the second half of the episode is them witnessing this mushroom cloud off in the distance and trying to figure out what happened, trying to kind of protect their own little community, because things quickly turn into chaos. You've got people rushing the gas stations, rushing the grocery store, and quickly emptying those things. And it really showcases the importance of prepping in my mind, because I do consider myself a prepper. I've got fuel storage, I've got water storage, I've got food, emergency food put away. I do things like grow a garden in our back area here. I've got a wood shop where I can build things myself, whether with power tools or hand tools. Um, I've got knowledge of some of these different things, how to fix things, work on cars. I used to work on cars in the Air Force. I worked in vehicle maintenance. And, I've got like guns and ammo and other things, medical supplies stored away. I did EMT work for just a little bit, or tried doing that for a little bit. And it shows the importance of having supplies put away so that you are not one of the people that's out there in the cold at night trying to fight your fellow townspeople for these supplies, because people do kind of get in altercations and things. It shows at the gas stations. You don't want to be one of those people. So I always encourage prepping for people. If everybody is a prepper and if everybody has supplies, then like the whole system just runs smoothly in some kind of collapse scenario. You're not relying on the government. You're not relying on some big box grocery chain in order to sustain yourself. You rely on yourself. And of course, as society is normal, society is functioning, you utilize those things. You use government services. You go to the grocery store, get food, and just rotate your stock out. But not nearly enough people in society are preppers, unfortunately. And then people are always saying like, oh, I'm just going to come to you when things fall apart. No, the hell you're not. Not if you're not helping yourself first. But anyway, let's move on. So, going into the second episode of Jericho, I'm not going to go episode by episode either. I just want to kind of focus on the beginning part of it, because that's really a fun aspect to focus on, the very beginning of this collapse and how these people respond. And the show does a really good job of showing those things. Because in the second episode, the whole episode is about the fact that they see a massive storm cloud off in the distance. And it's coming from the exact direction that mushroom cloud came from. And so one of the characters, who, if you've seen The Walking Dead, the character of Morgan, he's played by Lenny James. So before he was Morgan on The Walking Dead, he played a character in Jericho. And he's got a very mysterious background to him that you eventually learn throughout the show. You learn who he is, what experiences he has, who he used to work for, the things that he knows regarding this attack, this nuclear detonation that happened. And he kind of drops little hints here and there for the townspeople, that he does know a bunch of these things. So he knows about radiation, and they're like, why do you know these things? And he says, oh, I used to work for the police department in Columbus, Ohio, and after 9/11 we got up to speed on things. And so he kind of tells them how to prepare for everything. They have a couple of old fallout shelters that they try and get fixed up. One of them doesn't work at all, so they have to send people out to their salt mine and just close that entrance. Everybody who has a basement, they send them home, and they just have them cover up all their windows and doorways and things with plastic sheeting and tape. And they're trying to survive this coming storm because they think it's going to bring a bunch of the fallout nuclear radiation from that detonation in Denver right out east, right onto their town. And so it shows them preparing for that. They say that they're going to have to clear off the top 18 inches of soil before they can plant new crops, just in case any of that radiation goes down and gets absorbed into the ground. And so it focuses on things like that a lot of other shows don't really focus on or care about focusing on. And speaking of the farm work in the show, you have one of the main characters, Stanley. He's the best friend to our main character, Jake Green. And Stanley runs a little farm with his sister because both their parents passed away, years ago when they were both much younger, from a car crash. And they're running their parents' old farm by themselves. And at one point, they go out there and look at their crops, look at their corn, and they have worms in their corn. And so he has to get pesticides to put in his field, into all of his crops, so that they can get rid of all these bugs that are infesting it, or starting to infest it. And, there's no resupply coming in for this town. Whatever supplies they have are basically what they have, unless they can go out and trade, which they do get into a bit of that later. But, with it being a small town, there's all kinds of little conflicts that bubble up and rise up. And one of them is when this character, Stanley, is trying to get the pesticides. And there's one gal in town who actually has some that she could offer. But she wants half of his harvest. in order to get the pesticides. And he's like, that's insane. You're my friend. You know, we've known each other forever. You've known me since I was a little child. Because it's the older gal who runs the grocery store there, the general store. And, you know, she kind of creates like a big conflict with him. She doesn't want to just give the stuff to him. And there's a lot of little things like that that happen. One of the sheriffs, he's like best friends with Stanley as well, and he kind of comes in. He's like, "Well, she's saying that you stole them, so I need to come in here and check." And Stanley's like, "My words are not good enough for you." So there's a lot of little like conflicts that bubble up, the human elements that would normally come up in everyday life, and you see them come up in the show where, you know, like that sheriff guy, he's like, I'm just doing my job, man. I can't like give you special treatment just because you're my friend and I know you. I still have to check on these things. And you've got other aspects that come up that some shows don't deal with as much. Some of them do, like The Walking Dead kind of dealt with this. There's an illness that Jake Green's father gets, and you know him and his brother Eric, they have to go, you know, 100 miles away to another town to try and get some medical supplies, some different medicine from a much larger hospital. And you know, with their small town of 5,000 people, they have a small medical clinic there. If somebody was in some kind of serious condition, they would have just been flown, you know, to the next big town over to their larger hospital to actually be cared for. But in this scenario where society has really collapsed, there's no government that's out there to help them. The government's collapsed. Communication lines and supply lines have completely collapsed. So they're really on their own. And so they have to go out and try to get these things that they need in order to survive. And so those two, they take the 1969 Plymouth Roadrunner because the thing's a beast, and they head to this other town 100 miles away and get the medicine that they need and actually pick up a doctor as well who happens to be there. And they head back home and they save Jake Green's father. But it shows how quickly people could succumb to just even a small illness if they don't have the proper care and the proper tools at their disposal. And it really shows how fragile our society is. You know, with modern society, if you have some kind of flu or something, you can just head down to the store, grab some over-the-counter medication, or if things get really bad, you can just book an appointment for, you know, the next day or something and go to one of those like quick care centers. Of course, I'm coming at this from an American perspective, where we don't have like free healthcare or anything. I know, like in the UK and Canada, you guys have different systems over there. But the point is that in modern society, in first world countries mostly, we have access to the care that we need when we need it. And in this show, it shows a total breakdown of all those things. And I mentioned the general store earlier, and people just raided that place on that first day. They took all the food out of there. They raided everything. They took all the fuel and everything. So the general store basically doesn't function anymore. It doesn't work. But there's a young kid, and he's around 16 years old. He is kind of a loner. He gets bullied by other kids, and the gal who runs the general store is kind of like a mentor for him. And we find out through a recording on the phone, his mom is out of town and she leaves like a voice message for him. And she was in Atlanta, Georgia. And you hear on the voice recording that she is dead. She's gone. She got blown up in a blast as well, a nuclear blast. And when the other townsfolk hear about this, they're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know she was in Denver." And he's like, "She wasn't in Denver. She was in Atlanta." And then they all figure out, they all know that this wasn't just some kind of accident that happened over there near Denver. This is some kind of planned and coordinated attack across the country. They don't know how many bombs went off, how many cities are gone, how many people are dead. They just know that at least two places were blown up at the same time, two different major cities in the country blown up at the same time. And they're very far apart from each other. So this has to be some kind of coordinated attack. And because he lost his mom, the gal at the grocery store, who is kind of like a mentor to him, almost becomes like a surrogate mother to him and helps take care of him. And then later on, you know, fire goes through the trailer park where that kid lives, so she allows him to stay at the general store there, gives him a place to kind of live and stay out of the elements. But earlier on, that kid, goes like 5 miles out of town. I think it is, following the train tracks, because they were supposed to get a shipment of supplies that she never got to restock their store. And he finds that train, and it crashed into a car on the tracks, and it was just abandoned. But he finds all of the supplies, all the food and other general supplies that are still on the train, and he spends, I don't know how much time, hauling all of these things back into town. It shows this. It doesn't show this. It's off camera, and he restocks her entire store. And she comes across it and is just like completely bewildered by this, that he did this. And so the store is back open, and they have a barter system where nobody's using money anymore. Money is worthless. You could be a millionaire, and now you're just on the same level as everybody else. And I've kind of touched on this in previous videos, and I'll talk about this in future videos as well, because it's important to me. It's an important aspect of these types of stories, these genres that I'm covering, that I love and care about, is that when you have some kind of societal collapse, or like an apocalyptic scenario, it puts everybody on an even playing field. Like those billionaires that were at the top and screwing everybody over, now they're down here with everybody else. Everybody, like, it doesn't matter how much money you have, you're not more special than anybody else now. You're just on the same level as everybody else. They are brought down to our level, or the level of normality, I suppose, because being a billionaire is not normal. That probably shouldn't even exist in society, I guess. But that's a completely different topic. I'm not going to go into all that. But the people who have skills and knowledge, the people who have read their whole lives, and read books and done research on things and developed important skills, medical skills, growing food, people who can fish or hunt. Those are the people who matter now. Carpenters and people who can work on a vehicle, who can work on an engine or a generator, and can service it and fix it up. Those are the people of true value. And I think it's unfortunate that those people are not truly valued in our modern society, because those are the people that actually make everything run, make everything function in our society. And it would be the same in a collapse. Those are the people that actually make everything work, make everything function. But going back to the general store, they're not using money anymore. They're using cash. Dollars don't matter anymore in this scenario here. Nobody wants those pieces of paper. Why would anybody care about that? It doesn't have any value. They can't eat that. They can't drink that. And so they go to a barter system now. And she's got all kinds of food and other things in her general store there, and people have to come in and offer other things of value, whatever they can. People are offering jewelry that has silver and gold in it and stuff, and it doesn't inherently have value in that situation, but she's still accepting it. And a lot of other times people are trading bag of rice or something for a quarter pound of pork or meat or beef or something. And some people are like, well, I'll just take what you have. And then they have security guards that they hired, some random people from the town. So people even have to have security against their own town in this kind of situation, because as time goes on, people just start having less and less and less, because you can't just keep going to the store and buying what you need. There's a line later on in the show when one of the teachers, she tries to kind of get the school going again. One of the kids is like, this stuff isn't important. My mother's at home trying to grow beets out of our bathtub so we can eat next month. I don't care about this stuff. And he just leaves and goes home. And that's the reality of this kind of situation. If society were to collapse, it would be extremely difficult for a lot of people. Very, very difficult living situations and survival situations that people probably wouldn't be able to handle for the most part. And this is a small town that probably has a lot more survival instinct and survival skills than a big city would have. I couldn't imagine living in a big city of 1 million people. I mean, for me, a big city is even 200,000 people, but I couldn't imagine being around that many people who probably don't have any skills in this kind of situation. It would be total chaos. The streets would be just cluttered with garbage and human waste. and there would be thieves roaming around, gangs of thieves roaming around, trying to prey on the weak. So Jericho is a lot more realistic aspect, a realistic take on survival after a nuclear attack, like a mass nuclear attack. But it's far like more human, and it's, there's less evil going on in the show than if you were in like a big city. So a small town like this is where you would want to be for sure. Or even if you're near a big city, like out in the suburbs somewhere. Of course, even then, you're going to have people coming out from that city looking for supplies, looking for food, looking to take whatever you have. But Jericho is, it does a fantastic job of showing what this situation would be like for people. And another thing that happens kind of later on in the show in the first season is that we meet a character's dad. I mentioned the teacher. Her name is Emily, and she's kind of a love interest for the main character, Jake Green, because they kind of had like a relationship before he left. And then her fiance is gone because he was on a flight in another city when this attack happened. And her father runs this compound that's outside of town, and they kind of have like some shady businesses going on before this attack when society is still normal. So once everything kind of falls apart, they're going out and scavenging. They're taking in vehicles and fixing them up because they've got those skills. They're kind of going out and kind of raiding different areas and scavenging whatever supplies they can and kind of hoarding it all on their compound there and trying to make like a fortress and making themselves strong, giving themselves power because they have all of these supplies. And there's little conflicts that arise between that compound and the town. And the people at that compound, they're not, I don't want to say they're inherently evil. They're definitely not like good guys because they'll just go out and just kill somebody, like just to take their stuff. But Emily's dad, the leader, he's not like a real good guy either. But he's probably keeping that compound in check, kind of keeping them in line, rather than if he was gone, they'd probably just be out raiding everything. They'd probably be attacking the town, trying to take their supplies. But he kind of keeps them in check, keeps them in line. Um, Even though he's not a good guy per se, he kind of is kind of the moral compass for them, even though he's not a good guy, if you know what I'm saying. And so there's little conflicts like that arise, and the bigger conflict in the series, and this starts growing over the course of like many episodes, is towards the end of season 1. You have a big conflict with a neighboring town called New Bern, and this neighboring town, they figure out, and like I said, spoilers, they're building mortar shells. They're mass producing these things in the couple factories that they have there. And we find out why later on, because they have a couple trucks out in a field. They start just shelling Jericho with mortars. They just start sending them in. And they talk over the radio to the town's mayor, saying that they're just going to keep doing this day and night until they start giving up farms, giving them like their food and their supplies. And the people of Jericho, they decide to fight back. And they make a stand at Stanley's farm. And there was a big controversy with this show back when it aired because the New Bern forces come in, and then you've got the Jericho forces that are defending at Stanley's farm there. And you have like a major character death that happens during this time. And then you have the two sides that are about to clash. And the screen fades to black, and you hear a bit of gunfire. And then that's the end. Not the end of the episode, the end of the season. So that's how season 1 ends, is it fades to black, cliffhanger. These two sides are about to fight. You hear gunfire, then it's over. And then the show got canceled. And that's like the worst cliffhanger ever for a show. And fans were rightfully pissed at the time. And they were writing letters to the studio. And there was something from the very last episode of the show that has this cliffhanger, where Jake's grandfather is telling a World War II story, where an American commander was asked to surrender by the German forces, and the American commander responded with nuts, and they said that it means go to hell. And so, as like an inside joke with the fans, they started shipping thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds of peanuts to the studio, and they just got like mass shipments of peanuts from all over the place, from all the fans, and eventually they were actually like pressured into doing a second season. Of course, the people that made the show and all the actors and everything, they wanted to do a second season. It's the parent company who actually has to green light it and provide the funding and everything. So the parent company is who was pressured into doing it, and so they were like ecstatic that they could actually come back and continue telling the story and kind of leave it on a better note that isn't such a cliffhanger. And that's what they did with season 2. It's fantastic. So season 2, again, spoilers, it ends on a note where the United States is basically about to go into a second civil war. You've got the western half of the country under a new government in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And then you've got the eastern half of the country under a new government in Columbus, Ohio. And then you've got Texas that's kind of independent but are about to join. They were looking to join the Western Bloc with Cheyenne, but then by the end of the show, they actually have evidence that this new government in Cheyenne is actually responsible for these attacks in the first place. And so they're about to join the East. And then you're going to have the Second American Civil War. And I think that's a much better place to end it on. And I haven't read these, but I know they have some comics out there that I think actually follow up after season 2. But I think it's more fun sometimes just to leave things in the air if the cliffhanger isn't like too like direct, because that little conflict that they had with Newburn and Jericho where they're about to fight each other and then the screen fades to black, that's a terrible cliffhanger. This one where they're like, well, now we're about to see like the Second American Civil War, but the fighting hasn't actually like started yet, I think that's a much better cliffhanger to leave things on. But it's a far more realistic take on the nuclear apocalypse. Just a limited exchange. I mean, some like A Boy and His Dog or Fallout, total wasteland. That could be more realistic if we had just total nuclear war, just everybody launched everything that they had. But something that we could potentially see in real life, it's far more realistic to see something like in Jericho. And that'll be a future video. I want to talk about the realism of Fallout. How realistic is it that things could play out the way that they do in Fallout? Because there are some realistic things within Fallout that we could potentially see, whether in our lifetimes or in the future. But I definitely want to touch on some of those topics. But I just wanted to have a quick discussion about Jericho. Of course, I didn't touch on everything in this. I could have talked about the EMP, how EMP wiped out all their electronics, like fried all their new cars, and they had to rely on all their older cars. I could have talked about leadership and how like the mayor's role within this, and how they still tried to hold elections because they lost faith in their previous mayor. How they tried to reach out to the state government in Topeka and they couldn't reach him. And I could have talked about the whole conspiracy aspect, because there's a whole underlying conspiracy going on behind the scenes that you kind of learn a bit about throughout the show, and that's really fascinating. It's really well done. You kind of learn about the attacks and where they came from and the build up to them. I could have talked about the trading more, because there's a small band of I think 5 of them, the main characters. They head way off to a state fairgrounds called Blackjack, and they learn a bunch of information from those people because they're from all over the region, and they trade information, they trade supplies, trade goods. So there's a lot of really cool aspects of this show, but I don't want to drag it on and talk about it for too long. But I love Jericho. I just wanted to sit down for a little bit and kind of talk a little bit about the show and some of the elements within it. There's a really important aspect of community within the show because it's such a small town and everybody kind of knows each other. And, these people, just seeing them survive within this, the show is not about the bombs, it's about the community and them surviving. And it really reinforces the importance of having other people around you. If the society were to collapse and you're just like a lone wolf, you might be able to survive, but it's going to be far easier if you have other people around you. Make sure you have other people with different skills You know, you can have some people sleep while some people keep watch. You know, you're going to be able to have other people that can carry more supplies, that can keep lookout, that, you know, might be able to read a map better and traverse different terrain, try to find a different area to live. You're going to have a much easier time with a trusted group of people around you than just surviving on your own. And the show does a great job of showcasing that. But that's just a quick discussion about Jericho. I don't know how long this video is running, but if you enjoy this kind of content, please do leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you all in the next video. Thanks.